Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. It's a pleasure and I appreciate you turning up. Let me start with Bitcoin. Bitcoin, big dump in the last 24 hours, last trading at 8,425, down more than 17%. I take you back to something I wrote in November 2017. And again then, 2017 was when we had the enormous run-up, and therefore I'd warned the bulls that if you go back to the chart from 2017, you can see we can go all the way back to 1,000, really, without a blink of an eye. In 2017, I said, wow, what a ride. I said, this, you will agree, is mind-boggling inflation. In my experience, when I found myself riding a tiger by its tail, the key issue is the getting off. Of course, I love that quote from fellow Kuti: a tiger does not pronounce on its Tigray tune, it pounces. Going back to my article from 2017, I quoted T.S. Eliot in The Hollow Men: between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow, for thine is the kingdom. And I finished with, life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, wow, what a ride. Currently 8,420. And headed a lot lower, in my opinion. Very interesting interview on Real Vision, tremendous content coming out of there. Bonds, the mother of all bubbles. 8-minute interview, do have a listen. And I take you back to a number of articles I've written about the bond market, but in particular 24th of June, The Wizard of Oz. And then in that article I was quoting Sun Chartist, who sadly has departed from Twitter, but he said this: the premise of ZERP and NERP was always these are temporary measures for atrial fibrillation of the economy. 10 years later, same medicine in ever larger dosage to keep the patient alive, the definition of a vegetative state. 13th of August this year, I was writing about the feedback loop phenomenon, and I said then the most important currency to watch right now is the dollar renminbi. And a marketeer who I've recently discovered has a chart of the renminbi last at 712.25, and looks as if it's resuming the downtrend. We're about to publish an interview with Charlie Robertson of Renaissance Capital, and do have a listen to what he's talking about in terms of the renminbi, where he's forecasting the potential for an enormous rally. Home thoughts: the rainbow rose is a rose that has had its petals artificially coloured. The method exploits the rose's natural processes by which water is drawn up the stem. Rainmaker, 1973. Andrew Allies tweeted that his favourite poem is Ozymandias, Percy Bysshe Shelley. I met a traveller from an antique land who said, two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear: my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains round the decay of that colossal wreck. Boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Condolillo in his book Libra, there is a world inside the world. There's always more to it. This is what history consists of. It is the sum total of things they aren't telling us. Peter Frankopan, I am the powerful, the dreadful, the punisher of rebels, the hunter of Franks, Tartars and Armenians, snatcher of castles from rogues and master of the two seas. Kudos for top business card job titles from Mamluk Sultan al-Malik al-Ashraf Khalil in the early 1290s. Returning to Shelley, music, when soft voices die, vibrates in the memory. Odours, when soft violets sicken, live within the sense they quicken. Rose leaves, when the rose is dead, are heaped for the beloved's bed. And so thy thoughts, when thou art gone, love itself shall slumber on. And then I like this one. The flower that smiles today, tomorrow dies. All that we wish to stay tempts and then flies. What is this world's delight? Lightning that mocks the night, brief even as bright. Virtue, how frail it is, friendship, how rare, love, how it sells poor bliss for proud despair. But we, though soon they fall, survive their joy and all which ours we call. Whilst skies are blue and bright, whilst flowers are gay, whilst eyes that change ere night make glad the day, whilst yet the calm hours creep, dream thou, and from thy sleep then wake to weep. Political reflections, the airwaves are now thick with calls for Prime Minister Johnson to resign. Not surprising, but there is only one way to ensure it now Parliament is returning. Pass a vote of no confidence. Andrew Neil. Bercow is seen here announcing the UK Parliament reconvenes today. Should be quite a show, said C.S. Dickey. As I wrote on the 1st of April 2019, the theatre of the UK Parliament is, I am ashamed to admit, rather more interesting than was the Oresteia. The reason I know the Oresteia is because I went to watch Peter Hall's version of the London Oresteia. When Peter Hall, director of Britain's National Theatre, first glimpsed its new Olivier Auditorium, which is designed to resemble an ancient Greek amphitheatre, an idea long cooking in his head came bursting to the surface. At last he would have the opportunity to stage the Oresteia, the very one that I watched and I'm referring to, and in a space not dissimilar to the one Aeschylus actually used when the trilogy won him the annual Dionysian playwriting competition back in March 458 BC. Recall how long ago Agamemnon's father Atreus threw one of those unorthodox supper parties so popular in mythic times, inviting along his brother Theistus and serving him his two eldest sons as a main course. Later, Agamemnon himself sacrificed his daughter Iphigenia in order to guarantee favourable winds for the Greek fleet leaving to fight the Trojan War. These actions produced their inevitable reactions. On his triumphant return home, Agamemnon is killed in retaliation for Iphigenia's death by his wife Clytemnestra, aided by her lover Aegisthus, whose gripe is that he's the third son of the wronged Hephaestus. The Oresteia shows man struggling from chaos to civilization. It describes the breakdown of the old private system of correcting wrongs and the discovery of a new public means of ensuring that right prevails. So, as I said, over in the United Kingdom, the Brexit story continues to play out longer than the longest Oristère. And then on the 5th of August, I was writing about Boris and what I thought would happen. And I called it, What's Your Road Man? What's your road man? Holy road man, madman road, rainbow road, guppy road, any road. It's an anywhere road for anybody, anyhow. Where, body, how? And I asked then, and I ask it again. The key question is this: can Johnson self-eject Britain? Can he be stopped? This is a political calculation. And it might appear that he has been stopped dead in his tracks, but I don't think he has. Britain has become a republic with John Bercow at its head, Philip Johnston in the Telegraph. Sterling, when I put up this chart this morning as I was putting together my script, sterling now at 124.38. And this is the point. They took sterling up, if you remember, a few sessions ago, all the way up to 125.80. And every single short was cleaned out. And now there are no more shorts left. And therefore, in my view, the path of least resistance is lower, and we're going below 120. That's what I think. Come what may, in point of fact. The betting that Trump gets impeached has its biggest day ever in volume terms and soared well above 50%. That was on Predict It via Bianco Research, who then tweets, but don't get your hopes up that this is anything more than a ceremonial event. These same bettors also bet on the outcome of the election, and that has barely moved. Trump, in this very interesting delivery he made at the UN General Assembly, said, "The future does not belong to globalists, it belongs to patriots," he said. Bolsonaro, who I watched as well, "And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free," he said. And Hervé tweeted me, his war against ideology, one of the most dystopian speeches I have ever heard from the podium of the UNGA. I couldn't agree more. And then I was reading an article in The Onion about Greta Thunberg, nation perplexed by 16-year-old who doesn't want the world to end. And I went back again to the 1st of April when I was saying there is certainly a fin de siècle, even apocalyptic mood afoot. The conundrum, I said, for those who wish to bet on the end of the world is this, however: what would be the point? The world would have ended. And then on that point, I went back to something Bolsonaro said: trails of death and destruction, ideologically infected human souls and biologically perverted children. Quite an extraordinary speech that fellow made. And to the point, between 1970 and 2014, Earth lost nearly 60% of its mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, and amphibians, almost all of it due to human activity, and that's the point, in my view. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. And this is Venezuela reading a book while Trump speaks is a real mood, said this Tabitha Hoop. Currency markets, let's have a look at that. Euro dollar 109976, just hanging around there. The range is getting tighter and tighter. It's doing a little bit of a Bitcoin in my view. Dollar index 98.52, Japanese yen 107.25. Swiss franc 0.9862, the pound 124.39. And we're going lower in my view on that. Australian dollar 0.6775, that was a very counterintuitive squeeze higher we had in the Aussie yesterday. Indian rupee 71.0637, South Korean won 1198.475, the rial 416.30. The Egyptian pound, which has confounded the naysayers, 16.3085, and the rand 14.9089. As I wrote at the end of last year, the direction of the dollar is pivotal, and I said I was in a minority because I expected the dollar to strengthen about 10% through 2019. I said folks are keenly looking for chinks in the US economy. But I said, if the US economy slows, I can guarantee you the rest of the world will slow further. This is a dollar index chart from Bercow, 98.52 last. And I go back to one further point regarding the dollar, which I made in July specifically with respect to the US stoking up the fire with these incremental quarter-point rate cuts. It's a very dangerous situation because I think the Federal Reserve will be needing to raise rates into the election, something that will turn Trump apoplectic, I'm sure. Euro dollar, I think, is capped by 110.66, and I think we're going to 108, but we're in that sort of Bitcoin pattern, in my view. Just to put things into perspective about the euro, shock drop in IFO expectations component to a decade low points to a sharp slump in the German economy. That's from Holger. Gold, well, I missed that completely this year, I've got to admit, 1532. And I shouldn't have done, really, because it was a bit of a gift, that trade, when you consider the rush to negative interest rates, which means that the cost of holding your money, you're being penalized, you might as well hold gold, which seems to be the thesis behind it. Crude oil, $56.54, and actually I see this move lower as an opportunity, and I'm looking to buy December 2020 calls into this retracement. Those reasons I've said, I've given my reasoning. Aramco, we learn, is unlikely to list this year after the attack on plants. This is from various sources. Look, if you're calling a Tawadul listing of 1% of the shares with most of the people buying it having previously visited the Ritz-Carlton, you can call it a listing if you wish. I don't. I call it a Godfather situation. We work in Aramco in the morning, I tweeted, discuss. I said, same thing. I said, one prefers tequila, you can guess which one. And then I saw an article in the Haaretz opinion, what Saudi Arabia's MBS and WeWork's Adam Neumann have in common. Let's compare Adam Neumann and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. In less than 9 years, Neumann built WeWork into a shared office space giant and virtually created a new industry by dint of a charismatic personality and business vision. But when it came time for WeWork's initial public offering, everything fell apart. And you can read that in full. 2 years ago, some 300 of them were forcibly detained in Riyadh's Ritz-Carlton Hotel until they ponied up what Saudi authorities say was $100 billion in ill-gotten gains. It's well worth reading, and the Crown Prince is right that Saudi Arabia has no future as a petro state, but he's wrong in thinking he can buy himself the economy he wants. Money isn't the obstacle, the problem is the absence of the rule of law, basic freedoms, transparency, and a modicum of democracy. The Aramco IPO should serve as a case study in Economics 101 about how not to do it. And by the way, as my conclusion remains, we're at a peacock throne moment for the House of Saud. Look at this. Argentina, since 2001, the peso has lost 98% of its value against the US dollar, printing money for the people. Sub-Saharan Africa breaking an electoral suicide pact. Ethiopia Insight. Very interesting, long article. I'll read a few bits from it. In early August, the EPRDF Executive Committee announced that national elections will go ahead as scheduled next year. This means Ethiopia is about to enter a highly charged competition for power, with polling day perhaps less than 9 months away. Less than 2 years ago, Ethiopia was on the brink of implosion. It arguably escaped this fate due to the reformist wing of the EPRDF, dubbed Team Lemma, making demands of protesters their own and taking power via an alliance of the Oromo and Amhara parties. For the first time in Ethiopia's history, central power stems from Oromia. This is revolutionary indeed. Given volatile, polarized pluralism, an election will produce winners and losers and may well increase divergence and could lead to conflict. It's a really interesting article. The elephant in the room, however, is prevailing instability, which is the elephant in the room. Perhaps the most significant hurdle for peaceful elections next year, security remains poor in districts including West Olega and Guji in Oromia, the entire southern nations, and some areas in Benishangul Gumuz and Amhara. The situation is further complicated by the fact that the EPDRF itself is fragmented. Recent acrimony between the Tigray People's Liberation Front, the TPLF, and the Amhara Democratic Party is a case in point. EPRDF fragility does not end there, as there is also the issue of power sharing between constituent parties. For example, current TPLF, which represents a region of 6 million people, has an equal number of representatives in party committees as ODP, which represents 34 million people. This imbalance has long been questioned and is still subject to debate. Abiy's answer appears to be for the EPRDF parties and their affiliates to merge into one organization, but there is little time for this, and some parties or faction within parties may balk at such radical reform. This election is occurring without any change from the first past the post which enabled the mono-party system in the first place. It does not seem that this winner-takes-all approach is suitable for Ethiopia. The push to hold post-conflict elections soon usually comes from the incumbent, as it wants to hold them before competitors can adequately prepare. The Ethiopian case is no exception. The EPRDF leadership, despite its divisions, is well aware that the opposition is divided and that it is better organized. That said, in spite of everything, the nation could be on the cusp of something great if reforms are carefully handled. It has a bright future of transforming into a more democratic society, but if it is not handled carefully, it could prove to have been on the cusp of an abyss. After all, elections are not to be toyed with, and nor should they be a suicide pact. I wrote about Ethiopia on the 2nd of July when I was terribly enamored with the Prime Minister, who I thought, when you look at other leaders around Africa, he really set a different tone. I found him to be a Virilian and Gladwellian figure. The issue is whether what he is dealing with is beyond any human being. And I was quoting Gladwell, to create one contagious movement, you often have to create many small movements first. Look at the world around you. It may seem like an immovable, implacable place. It is not. With the slightest push in just the right place, it can be tipped, said Malcolm Gladwell. In matters language and linguistics, he tapped into a Nelson Mandela 1994 mood. At that time, he'd been in power 90 days, and I said it represented the most consequential arrival of an African politician on the African stage since Mandela walked out of prison, blinking in the sunlight, and constructed his rainbow nation. I recalled watching the whirling dervishes of the Mevlevi order on a night of a full moon in Konya, really remarkable. In Turkey, I thought what they all have in common with Abiy is about speed and velocity. Paul Virilio terms it dromology, which he defined as the science and the logic of speed. He notes that with speed at which something happens may change its essential nature, and that which moves with speed quickly comes to dominate that which is slower. Whoever controls the territory possesses it. Possession of territory is not primarily about laws and contracts, but first and foremost a matter of movement and circulation. I take you back to a quote that Abiy made about Tigray. He said, the people of Tigray are still begging for a drop of water. The TPLF is not the people of Tigray. And then I was saying the Prime Minister needs to execute real quick on the economic front. Zimbabwe, this is a plot twist. The black market gap vanishes after the central bank intervenes. The gap between the Zimbabwe's black market and official currency rates vanished after the central bank tightened regulations on trade and foreign exchange by bureau de change operators. On Monday, black market rates for the Zimbabwe dollar ranged from 14.7 to 15. The official rate was at a record low of 14.91, and the unofficial rate had slumped as low as 23. I don't know what's going on there. We're going to look into that more deeply. South Africa rides investor demand to raise $5 billion from bond sale, more than twice oversubscribed. Success of the transaction, believed to be the largest ever out of sub-Saharan Africa, as an expression of investor confidence in the country's sound macroeconomic policy framework and prudent fiscal management, said the National Treasury. The Treasury said it sold the bonds on September 23rd in two tranches, 2 billion 10-year notes with a 4.85% coupon, so more than 300 over, 3 billion 30-year notes with a 5.75% coupon. Citi, Deutsche, Nedbank, Rand Merchant Bank, Standard Bank. South African all shares up 5.47% year to date. Dollar versus Rand 14.8966, 1550 range is where we've been for a while. Egyptian pound 16.29. It's doing rather well in the circumstances. However, the stock market has shed 10.66% since Friday last week, wiping out year-to-date total return. It's up now just 1.03%. It was the best performing market in Africa before. Nigerian all share down 12.98%. Year-to-date, the worst performing market in the world during Buhari's tenure. 2 men have been arrested with weapons they plan to use for an attempted coup in Ghana. Have a look at these photos. And I saw a tweet below, "Those weapons are not even enough to take over a cattle dip in my village," said Fabian Cowido, and he's not wrong. Ghana Stock Exchange is down 11.39% year-to-date. Traffic jams in Kenya's capital bleed $1 billion from the economy. Cars and minibuses stuck in grinding traffic cause many a missed meeting, potentially costing East Africa's largest economy almost $1 billion a year in lost productivity. In a new report, it put the average travel time in the city, home to 3.2 million people, at 57 minutes, and is recommending a bus rapid transit system for 5 key routes to stem the gridlock. CBK raises alarm over spike in cash. Wheat buyers in Narok suspects dirty cash being used ahead of the 1,000-shilling note phase-out on September the 30th. According to Mohammed Wellier, 100 billion shillings, $1 billion, has been extinguished in this demonetization program. If the info that over 100 billion is yet to return with a week to go is accurate, then we're looking at massive extinguishing of over 50%. He does have his doubts though, either data is not accurate or the criminal enterprise is bigger than we thought. I'm hoping the former is the case. KCB Group has taken over Mumias Sugar. Have a look at this chart of Mumias Sugar's share price. What a story. Nairobi all shares up 3.77% year to date, and the NSE 20 is down 13.55% year to date. Thank you for stopping by.